Just before I begin our reading this morning, I do want to recognize that there is someone who was a regular viewer of these videos online right from the beginning, who won't be viewing this one or any of them in the future, and that someone was my mom, who recently passed away. I do want to say, though, that she had a formative influence on my faith and became a great encourager in my ministry later on, too. And so I just wanted to take a moment to say that I'm thankful to God for her. And I also want to express my thanks to each of you who've kept me and my family in your prayers, and people who will be watching this online as well. I want to thank you for all your support. And on that note, let's draw our strength from God and His promises in His Word. Our reading today comes from Hebrews chapter 4, verse 14 to chapter 5, verse 10. Since then, we have a great high priest who has passed through the heavens, Jesus, the Son of God. Let us hold fast to our confession. For we do not have a high priest who is unable to sympathize with our weaknesses, but we have one who in every respect has been tested as we are, yet without sin. Let us therefore approach the throne of grace with boldness, so that we may receive mercy and find grace to help in time of need. Every high priest chosen from among mortals is put in charge of things pertaining to God on their behalf, to offer gifts and sacrifices for sins. He's able to deal gently with the ignorant and wayward, since he himself is subject to weakness. And because of this, he must offer sacrifice for his own sins as well as for those of the people. And one does not presume to take this honor, but takes it only when called by God, just as Aaron was. So also Christ did not glorify himself in becoming a high priest, but was appointed by the one who said to him, "You are my son, today I have begotten you." As he says also in another place, "You are a priest forever, according to the order of Melchizedek." In the days of his flesh, Jesus offered up prayers and supplications with loud cries and tears to the one who was able to save him from death. And he was heard because of his reverent submission. Although he was a son, he learned obedience through what he suffered. And having been made perfect, he became the source of eternal salvation for all who obey him, having been designated by God a high priest according to the order of Melchizedek. The word of the Lord, thanks be to God. Let us pray. Our Lord and God, we thank you for your promises, for your good word to us. We thank you that we have a great high priest, Jesus, who presents our needs to you. And we thank you for the Holy Spirit, who, as we ask for your grace, who brings that grace to our hearts. And we pray that you would give us your love and grace today, that you would show us your truth, that we might grow in our understanding and our love for you, our God. May this be a holy time in your holy presence, that you would speak to us. And now, God, I pray that the words of my mouth and the meditation of all our hearts would be acceptable in your sight, O Lord, our rock and our Redeemer. Amen. Well, did you know you have a priest? If you're a Christian, you have a priest. It says so right in Hebrews 4:14. It said, we have a great high priest. And in fact, he's a high priest and a great one at that. Now, this may not come as a total surprise to you. You may already know that the word Christ means anointed. And as an anointed one, Jesus Christ is our prophet, priest, and king. Those were the offices where anointing with oil was a part of the consecration in that role. And the priesthood of Christ is one of those elements we don't always think about. But still, even though we know it's a part of what it means to be Christ, it's not likely an idea that sits at the forefront of your mind. And yet you have a great high priest. Now, we need good specialists in our lives, don't we? People who can do those things that we can't do for ourselves, or at least not very well. For example, maybe you're not so able to fix your own car. Anyone out there? well, then you might need a mechanic, right? And of course, here's a little labor rate cost per hour for mechanics. First one, if you watch us, $55 per hour. If you give us advice, $65 per hour. If you help or assist us, $85 per hour. And if you worked on it before, $105 per hour. Yeah. Sometimes we want to think we are able to do things that we're not quite able to do. And so, we understand, though, the value of, say, a good mechanic or a good professional in a lot of different roles. People understand the value of specialists, but do people know how great it is to have a great high priest? If you ask someone if they had a good mechanic, many people would say yes, or they'd at least know what you were talking about. But if you were to just go on the street and say, hey, to some random person, you say, do you have a good high priest? What would they say? They wouldn't have any idea what you meant, would they? No, it's not usually an idea we have floating around. It's maybe harder for us to connect to. And yet, having a good high priest, I'd say, is more important than having a good mechanic or a good financial advisor, even a good doctor. Having a good high priest is more important than having any of these. And that's what I want us to see here in God's Word today, that we have a great high priest who is of the greatest value to us. Now, this idea of a high priest is not one that's all that familiar to us in our culture today, at least not as familiar as it would have been to the Hebrews, the original audience of our book here, or really anyone who grew up in ancient Israel. That's not anybody here, I suppose, is it? No? Okay, I didn't think so. Now, what do you think of, though, when you imagine a high priest? Now, the first thing that comes to my mind would probably be the clothing. Someone dressed up in those priestly garments, maybe with a special hat or tunic and robes with ornate decoration, maybe the chest plate with the gems and all of that. And that is a part of what the high priest was. He was someone in the Old Testament times, in the ancient Israel, who would have special clothing that set him apart from all the other priests and even, let alone, all the other Israelites. But that was just one part of it. He also had special work to do. He was one who would offer the sacrifices on the altar. When people brought their gifts, they'd all have livestock. They'd bring that to the temple courts and the temple grounds, and they would have sacrifices there. He would help present those. But he would also bring offerings into the special place of the temple itself, the inner building. The holy place where he would maybe bring or change the showbread, light the lamps, burn the incense, and once a year even enter into the Holy of Holies, the holiest place of all. But this is where the work of the high priest was so important. He would offer the gifts of the people and serve God in God's presence on their behalf. Now, what is it about Jesus that makes him such a great high priest and of such great value to us? Well, there are actually many things, but we get a good introduction here in Hebrews 4 and 5. Now, what do we see first? What makes Jesus such a great high priest? Right away, we notice about where he works. It says, since then we have a great high priest who has passed through the heavens, Jesus, the Son of God, let us hold fast to our confession, to our words of faith, our creed. Now we're reminded here who our high priest is. It is Jesus, the Son of God. He's the Christ. He's the priest that we have. But notice the priestly element. Like the old priests of Israel, our great high priest serves in a holy place. It says here, he has what? Passed through the heavens. This is a reference to what we call the ascension. After Jesus died on the third day, he rose again from the dead and he ascended into heaven, as we say when we confess our faith in the Apostles' Creed. He went up from this world into the heavenly presence of God. This was stated in the opening verses of Hebrews, actually in this very book, in the first chapter, in verse 3, where it says, after making purification for sins, he sat down at the right hand of the majesty on high. So where is Christ? He is ascended. He's in the glorious presence of God the Father in a place that we know we cannot go to as mortal human beings, but he is in the holiest place imaginable, the holiest place of all. And so that's where he is. This is a very priestly statement, notice, making purification for sins. And we'll look more into that later. But notice where he serves. Just as the high priest would offer the sacrifices before entering the temple, Jesus made a sacrifice before entering through the heavens into that sacred presence of God. And this is something that makes him our great high priest. He serves in the greatest place, not simply the holy place or even the Holy of Holies that were a part of the temple or tabernacle, but in the very presence of God's majesty in heaven. And this says something about who he is. Where he works, where he serves, says something about who he is. Have you ever thought about that? When you work somewhere, maybe you have the little, if you are in an office, you might have a little nameplate to say, hey, this is my place to work, and that's your special spot. You know, I get to work in this. You know, if I'm standing behind the pulpit, you know, this is my place to do my work, right? To do a part of my job anyway. But I was thinking about this. Imagine someone working in the corner office of a high-rise building, and compare that to working in a cubicle somewhere in the basement. Does the location of where you work say something about the status and the value of that job or what importance it has? Of course it does. Where would you rather work? Would you rather have the corner high-rise view over the city, or would you like to be kind of stuck somewhere? Now, that's no offense to anyone who works in a basement in their office. I have an office in my basement, okay? But it's not about status for me. But think about where that better workplace would be. The best workplace is typically reserved for the people in special positions. But now think of Jesus. He's not in the corner office of a high-rise. No, he's got that beat. He's above the highest high-rise, isn't he? He is there in the very presence of God in heaven. What better office could you have? That's where you want to be. He is our great high priest, and where he serves in the very presence of God the Father is a part of what makes him so great. So that is one element of his greatness as our high priest. What else do we see here? Well, another element is that he is one who sympathizes with us. He is someone who can sympathize with us as our high priest. It says in Hebrews 4, continuing, we do not have a high priest who is unable to sympathize with our weaknesses, but we have one who, in every respect, has been tested as we are, yet without sin. So, in other words, we have these weaknesses in our lives. There are these things that we feel. Maybe sometimes we feel alone. Sometimes we feel depressed. Maybe sometimes we feel fed up or impatient. And because of our weaknesses, that doesn't always reflect well in the decisions we make. Sometimes when we're feeling great, we know what the right thing to do is and we're just ready to do it. Maybe help someone out or show some care or just do the right thing. But then we have these times of weakness. We say, you know what, I'd rather do this instead. Or in those times of weakness, we just make the wrong choice. We think the sinful thing is something that will help us feel better. But we have these weaknesses, and so we face these temptations, and we're tested at times. And the thing is that Jesus can sympathize with our weaknesses. He knows what it feels like to be hungry or thirsty, to be tired, to feel alone, to feel rejected. Jesus knows what all of those weaknesses are like, those feelings are like. But what was different about him compared to us? In our weakness, we might have a weak moment and we get a little maybe snippy with people, right? We are not always at our best. We do the wrong thing. But what Jesus did, although he experienced the same weaknesses we have, he did so and did not sin. He never did the wrong thing. And so in this way, he's not only great in that he can relate to us, but Jesus is great in that he overcame sin. He faced temptations just like we do every day, but he overcame them. And this is even as Christians. Now, as non-Christians, we might not even, we wouldn't care whether we're sinning or not. But as Christians, we do care. It's really a moment of weakness that we might sin. But we have to acknowledge that we do. High priests of long ago, what would they do? Were they perfect believers? They weren't rebels, but were they really perfect in how they lived? Well, look at what it says here in 5:1. Every high priest chosen from among mortals is put in charge of things pertaining to God on their behalf to offer gifts and sacrifices for sins. And he is able to deal gently with the ignorant and wayward, since he himself is subject to weakness. And because of this, he must offer sacrifice for his own sins as well as for those of the people. So what's the real contrast here? You can see there's a comparison, that there's weakness that Jesus experienced, weakness that the high priests of long ago experienced. But the difference was that while the Old Testament priests, the Hebrew priests, had to make offerings and sacrifices for their own sins, Jesus did not. And so even though there were high priests long ago, not at more than one at a time, but there were high priests who served in that role, they were not as great as the high priest who never sinned. And yet this one who never sinned knows what it's like to be us, to be one of us, to go through the things that we go through, to feel the things we feel. Ken was saying earlier, I didn't know your mom was a physiotherapist. And I'll tell you, it's been a blessing. Ask my wife especially. She's still doing exercises to feel better after her third kid, right? Third child. Sometimes they get heavy and you have a lot of weight. And I'll be honest, my second child, he didn't walk for a long time. The one who ran out of walking, he didn't walk. He didn't start walking very early either. But I kind of threw my shoulder out playing softball. And one of the things was he didn't walk, so you can't just put a crawler in every mud puddle and floor in the world, right? You've got to carry them a lot more. And my shoulder was just so thrown out. It was in constant pain. I couldn't sleep at night. I was, sleeping on a couch. Like if I moved at all, it was in pain, just even moving my body. So I was in a really bad spot. So I thought, okay, I better call my mom. Now, normally it's not always going to help you to call your mom, but it did. And I said, Mom, will this ever, I felt the pain all the way down my arm. She said, that's not good. You want the pain centralized closer to your neck. That would be better if it got back there. Move that pain back. And she gave me a bunch of exercises to do. And I said, is this ever going to get better? She said, you'll probably always have weakness and pain in your arm, in your shoulder. My shoulder is 100% better. That doesn't mean I can't hurt it again. It's not invincible. But I don't feel any pain at all. I thank God for that too. But that took a while. And what's neat about the physiotherapists, for example, though, is that these are real people who also have their own aches and pains. They're not people who say, you've got pain, shoulder pain. I wonder what pain feels like, but let me give you some advice and help you with that. There's something special about someone who's gone through the same thing, who knows what at least pain feels like. Now, I'm sure my mom did not experience every single injury she helped people get through, thankfully, because that would be a lot. Her training has to be a little broader than just what she experienced, I'm sure. But it's good to know that the person who's helping you can sympathize. And we are weak in our lives, aren't we? We go through tough times, and we're not always going to be at our best, or we're in a situation where we might not be at our strongest. But Jesus can sympathize. We have a high priest who did not sin, and we say, oh, he's so perfect and glorious, and how can I even relate to him? No, he can relate to us, and we can relate to him. It's a beautiful thing. And that's one of those things, though, that makes our high priest such a great high priest. He can sympathize with us. And what's the point here? What are we supposed to do with this? Well, in verse 16 it says, just to highlight it here, it says, "Let us therefore approach the throne of grace with boldness, so that we may receive mercy and find grace to help in time of need." We are weak, we need help. Should I dare approach God's glorious throne and ask him for help? Well, we don't just have a regular high priest. We have a high priest who never sinned, who never fell short, and he is in the very presence of God, and he is the one who's advocating for us. So what is the result? Should we say, well, I don't know if God's going to really care about me because I don't have a good representative going in? Like, you might wonder if you were an Israelite long ago, I hope that the sacrifices work. I hope this priest does his job right. If you were to send in someone to do a task for you, maybe if you had a lawyer, if you needed a lawyer, you'd hope that lawyer does a good job, right? Plead my case and do a good job, all right? I'm counting on you. And if you didn't trust in that lawyer, you would not be bold to go to court. But if you had an amazing lawyer who never makes mistakes, boy, you wouldn't have a second thought. And that's what we have in Jesus. He is sinless. And so when we want to go to God with our needs in Jesus' name, as his people, we should go with boldness. That's what it says. Approach the throne of grace with boldness, because he's the one who's ready to offer that grace to us. He's the channel of that grace. And whenever we're in need, whenever we feel weak, don't hesitate to take your needs to God in prayer, because you have a great high priest, a great one. Now, not to be outdone in terms of the other high priests of long ago, you might know that the high priests long ago were the sons of Aaron. Aaron was the first high priest, the brother of Moses, and so he had this special job right away. There were other priests too, who were not the high priest, who would help the high priest. And there were also Levites of a certain group, tribe of the Israelites, who also helped around the temple and its needs. But this high priest was special. He was one person of the line of Aaron. So, but who made him a priest? Who made Aaron the high priest? It was actually God. Now, if Jesus came along and said, well, maybe people elected me as the high priest, or I just claimed it for myself, that wouldn't be on the same status. So just not to be outdone, Hebrews 5 does point out that Jesus was made high priest by God as well, God the Father. It wasn't by some other means. It says in verse 5:4, "And one does not presume to take this honor, but takes it only when called by God, just as Aaron was." So Jesus is not outdone on this level in terms of being called to the high priesthood. Verse 5, "So also Christ did not glorify himself in becoming a high priest, but was appointed by the one who said to him, 'You are my son, today I have begotten you.'" And that's a reference back that Jesus is God's son, that the Messiah is going to be the Son of God. But as he also says in another place, and this is really the argument, "You are a priest forever according to the order of Melchizedek." Now, Melchizedek is an older priest. He's not a son of Aaron. He's completely different. And there is a ton to be said about him, like a lot in the book of Hebrews. If you remember my last sermon, there's a lot to be said about this. Right? That's the next verse, and I might show it. I don't know if I put that in the slide. But Christ is a priest forever. And this is from Psalm 110, verse 4. It's a messianic psalm. This one who is to be the Messiah, the King, is also to be a priest. The anointed king is going to be an anointed priest, but not of the tribe of Levi, not a son of Aaron, but in a different category, in the order of Melchizedek. Now, I can't go into too much detail there, but that is, actually, here we go. About this we have, that's where I meant to put that, right? In verse 11 is where it shows up. About this we have much to say. But let's take a look here in when it's quoted. But let's take a look here about the work of Jesus and what he did. It says, in the days of his flesh, Jesus offered up prayers and supplications with loud cries and tears to the one who was able to save him from death, and he was heard because of his reverent submission. So throughout his life, he obeyed God's law perfectly. He never sinned. He never broke the law. And he also had a mission to offer his life for our sake, the sake of his people. Although he was a son, he learned obedience through what he suffered. And having been made perfect, he became the source of eternal salvation for all who obey him, having been designated by God a high priest according to the order of Melchizedek. And so here's that quote about Melchizedek is found here. And about this we have much to say. And so much more will be said about Melchizedek, because I know you're so eager to learn about Melchizedek, right? Okay, but I'm sorry, I've got to save it for another day. But here's the thing. Notice the priestly role of Christ. Yes, he is appointed by God, and he's not outdone by Aaron in that regard. He's of the order of Melchizedek. He's a different kind of priest. But think of the priesthood of Christ and how important that is. We think of Jesus as the anointed king, which is good and wonderful. We say Jesus is Lord. Wonderful. But what about the priesthood of Christ? What's so important about that? Well, if Christ is the king means that we have to accept his authority, we accept his rule, his reign, his kingdom, and his judgments. Christ as our priest is not him advocating upon God for us, but rather him working for us in God's presence. It's really the blessings that we get through Christ. It's really due to his priestly role. He joins us as one of us. We are his people, and on our behalf, he goes before God the Father. He offers his sacrifice. He presents his offering, and he goes into the presence of God. And he intercedes for us. He mediates for us. So all of the favor and the grace of God that we receive, it's all because of Christ in his priestly role. It's not because he's a king. It's because he's a priest. It's because he did this work on our behalf. That's what makes him a priest. And what is that work? Well, although he was a son, he learned obedience through what he suffered. And having been made perfect, he became the source of eternal salvation for all who obey him. And that's what's tied to him being designated by God as a priest, because he gave his life as an offering, as a sacrifice. He suffered for us. That's his priestly role. And what's the benefit but eternal salvation? The salvation we have is all because Jesus was a priest, because he made an offering, because he intercedes on our behalf. It's amazing. We can't forget that we need a priest. So you might say, it's good to have a good mechanic when your car is broken down so you can get back on the road. Maybe it's good to have a good financial advisor or a good doctor. But think about how much more important it is to have a good priest. A good, or even a great, high priest. A mechanic will get you on the road, but Jesus will put you on the right path of life. A financial advisor will maybe make you rich, but Jesus is going to give you treasure in heaven. A doctor might make you get well, but Jesus will heal your soul and give you eternal life because he's the high priest. Yes, did you know you have a great high priest? And you can know how great he is because of where he works in the very holy presence of God, because of how he was appointed to his work by God himself, and that work in his service is for his people. His work is for you. Praise be to God, Father, Son, and Holy Spirit, now and forever. Amen. And now let us go with God's blessing. May the love of God our Father, the grace of our Lord Jesus Christ, and the fellowship of the Holy Spirit be with us all. Amen.